Everywhere you look on YouTube, you will see people talking about cinematic movement, about moving the camera for dynamic action, about using gimbals and Steadicams and sliders to create depth and to bring the viewer into the world. Well, for the first 70 odd years of filmmaking, the camera didn't move much at all. Yet those decades produced some of the greatest and most cinematic films in history. That was because cameras were much bigger, clumsier, heavier, and it just wasn't easy to pick up a camera, put it on your shoulder, and go and shoot something. Gimbals haven't been invented yet. Steadicam only turned up in the 70s. They definitely had dolly track, but it was something that was only used on a couple of shots in the movie, and it certainly wasn't the standard. So how did filmmakers, for the first 7 decades of film, design complex shots without moving the camera? Well, they used tripods. The first ones were wheel-driven and geared because the cameras were so heavy. But in about the 50s, the fluid head tripod arrived, and it made it much easier and much more intuitive to pan and tilt the camera. If you're not familiar, panning refers to the camera left and right, and tilt refers to up and down. The reason that these are both such good storytelling tools is that that's what our head does naturally, whereas zooms and even dollying left and right are a little bit more unusual. You can of course do both these movements at the same time, but modern tripods like the Benro BVX series that I have allow you to set different strengths and resistances on the different axes of the camera. This means you can make it easier to pan or to tilt. In today's video, we're going to go over some of the most overlooked and underutilized camera moves on a tripod, so you can use them to tell better stories and create an atmosphere in your filmmaking that brings people into your world. The first critical factor with tripod mounted shots is the shot size, or how close you are to the subject and what lens you're using. Yes, you can always pan left and right in a wide shot, but it's so much more dynamic when you do it on a tight shot of the subject and you track through the environment, revealing more and more as you go. This allows the audience to take in what's happening slowly than just cutting and giving them all the information at once. It allows the filmmaker to direct the viewer's eye and control the speed at which they receive new information. On a long lens like this 24-70 punched in on a full frame sensor to give us a 100mm equivalent, we are very close to this subject, even though we're still 20 or 30 feet away. That means as the subject moves through the frame and we move with her, we get a whole bunch of new information. And we get all this wonderful motion that makes the character seem really dynamic. If the subject then walks through the environment and we pan with them, we get something that feels a lot more like a slider or a moving shot, but it doesn't require any of the equipment, and it's far closer to what we would see normally when we're just moving our head on our neck. This type of tripod shot makes it a lot more personal and a lot more observational, as though we were seeing something in everyday life. Another great use of this is to tilt up to establish a location, or to tilt down to see our character in it. This is probably the easiest and quickest establishing shot to use. It just takes a couple of seconds, but it really establishes the character, the location, and the mood of the scene in a really artful way. You can also use this kind of shot in micro when you're establishing someone standing up or sitting down. I particularly like the stand-up shot because the distortion of using a slightly wider lens on this makes the person who stands up seem very tall and intimidating and projects their power. If you've ever had the experience in real life of meeting someone who then stands up to shake your hand and you realize they are far shorter or far taller than you thought they were, it is a nice reveal and tells us more about who we're dealing with. The final way to use tripods creatively is the POV shot, by combining a pan or tilt with a focus change to really put your audience in the mind of the character, in their perspective. This again comes back to the fact that our eyes don't zoom, but they do pan and tilt. When we, as the audience, see through the eyes of the character, we in turn identify much more with that particular character. We invest our own agency in what they're doing. One last use of this is the whip cut. This is where you whip pan from one subject to another and then hide a cut within the distortion or the blur of the quick pan. A classic way to use this was with the knife throw, where one character whips a knife down and just drops it at their side. And then we whip pan across to the knife landing in the wall, and maybe a production assistant has just touched it beforehand and it's still bouncing. Together with the sound effect, this really sells the shot. In the age of gimbals, handheld, Steadicam, and sliders, the humble tripod is often overlooked, but it still remains one of the most powerful filmmaking accessories that most of us have access to. A great cinematic tripod like the carbon fiber BVX range from Benro can really elevate your filmmaking and allow you to achieve sharp, concise, and safe camera movements, no matter what your level of experience. Benro is also the sponsor of this video. You can check out the description for links to all the gear that I'm using from B&H. If you're interested more in camera movement, lighting, and more advanced cinematography, please check them out at canonmasterclass.com. I have a ton of tutorials there, everything from introductory camera primers to post-production and how to get your videos to look like this. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.